Ornstein has confirmed this, as we can put up on the screen now, that Chelsea's meeting with Graham Potter this afternoon with a view of naming him as a head coach. Brighton have understood to have granted permission for talks after Chelsea indicated a readiness to pay the release clause. Graham Potter gave a blessing to discussion. So, I mean, this has happened so quickly. I just don't feel like they finished last night's game and said, because they were just planning for him to go for a new manager within a day. We normally don't see that. Look what happened when Ollie was sacked. Took them a week or 3 or 4 weeks to find an interim, and then 2 or 3 months to decide on what they were going to do, because they had no plan. When you have no plan, it takes a while to bring in a replacement. It isn't just pinpoint, and they're not going for a trash manager either, because Graham Potter's serious. He's a real serious manager.
Yeah, mate. When you watch Brighton play, they literally play most teams off the park. Yeah, they don't necessarily win every game. Of course they don't. They probably don't even win half of their games. But you look at the quality of player he's got at Brighton and the football they're playing. Now add into that the defence that he's got. Yeah, like most people would sit there and go, well, I don't want him. Oh, I wouldn't have him. Well, I wouldn't take him. Then they lose their best player every season, apparently best player every season. But they always seem to keep the same style of play. They always seem to keep the same, just churning more people through that football club that keeps them still playing the football he wants. So he picks the right profile of player to come into what he wants. I think that it'd be perfect for Chelsea. I can't lie. And it's funny because me and Rance were talking about this yesterday, because they slapped up Leicester at the weekend. And I was like, mate, they play some seriously good football. And I was like, I'm shocked he ain't got a big club. I said, a big club needs to come in for him, because if you give him money, plus that style of play, mate, that's dangerous. Look at what he was doing at Ostersund. Yeah. I was at the game, home and away, against Ostersund when he was their manager. They played Arsenal off the park at the Emirates. Yeah, we battered them at their ground, but we got passed off the park. Yeah, and they beat us at the Emirates. And at one point, you could hear a pin drop in the Emirates, because it was a case of we could go out here, and we were 3-0 up from the first leg. Like, it was mad.
I remember that game. I remember the first leg as well. I remember I did a watch along with Ty and, God rest his soul, Claude, in my old studio, and I remember that game. And this is the thing. I saw a lot of people like laughing at Chelsea today. Tuchel's gone, you're German manager, and there's a part of me that wants to join in as a rival. And then I think, look who they're linked to. Like, Poch is probably not the lesser of the three managers, but there's Poch they're linked to that wouldn't be bad. They were linked to Zinedine Zidane, and then Graham Potter, that has done God's work with Brighton. It's funny, when you get like a top 4 team or a top 6 team that's like, we've made top 4 on a shoestring budget. No, Brighton have a shoestring budget. You've got hundreds of millions of pounds. Stop making yourself the Disney story underdogs. What Graham Potter has done with Brighton, pound for pound, is success. And I'm very intrigued to see what he does with this group of Chelsea players. You've obviously got those youngsters they bought. You've got a great academy that produces brilliant quality. Like, Graham Potter, for me, he has to be taken beyond serious, if that makes sense. Like, it really is. Do you get the feeling that Chelsea could regret this? Do you feel like, whether it's sacking Tuchel, going for Potter, or do you actually think this could end up making them a better team?
No, mate, how are you even asking me that question, bro? Come on. Yeah, and this is what I find funny. Like, so many people are sitting there laughing, saying, I see a tweet earlier, it was getting loads of traction, saying, yeah, well, Chelsea don't do a long-term project. They've sacked 10 managers in the last 8 years. Yeah, and I'm like, no, their project is Project Win. Yeah, and even if you do win, you still might get sacked. Yeah, because it might not be the style of play that the owner wants, or the style of play that the team want to play. Yeah, and at the end of the day, Chelsea are the most successful club in this country for the last, 15 years, 20 years? There's a reason for that. Look how many managers they've had. And I've said this on here before, when the Arteta gang, that has conveniently disappeared, by the way. I don't know why. I think maybe we lost a match at the weekend. But the funny thing is, Terry, yeah, because I'm not in the mud at the minute. I haven't seen that all week. But the thing for me is, and I've said this before, the 3 most successful clubs domestically and in European competition in the last 15 years, before last year, have all had over a manager a season. Yeah, and that's Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and Chelsea. They're the 3 most successful clubs in the world in that 15-year period. Yeah, and they've all had more than 1 manager a season on average, if you break that 15 years down. So there's obviously something there, isn't there? When we were growing up, Terry, they had the Galacticos and that. I remember Del Bosque at Real Madrid won the league. 3 days later, won the Champions League. The next day, they sacked him. Do you know what I'm saying? That is what elite
Yeah.
level clubs do, because it ain't about building for 4 years down the road. Yeah. The future and the project should be, the future is now. It's the season we are on now. Yeah. Not 4 years down the road, not 5 years down the road. Yeah, cool. Have a plan for that. Yeah. But that should be part of the now plan as well, if you see what I'm saying, and vice versa.
Yeah.
You have to plan for now. The plan for now is to win everything. Yeah. But the background is, we'll build up the training academy, we'll build up the youth teams, we'll build up this.
Yeah.
But on the first team side of things, the project should be win. And
I think
Chelsea do that regardless of who the manager is. Out of all the managers Chelsea have had, how many have not won anything? I think only Lampard, didn't it? And Villas-Boas, or did he win something? I don't know. Maybe he did.
I don't think Villas-Boas did.
He got sacked.
Big Phil Scolari can't have won anything. He went within one season. But yeah, I think pretty much every other Chelsea manager has picked up a trophy of sorts. But look, I agree with what you're saying to a large extent. And the one thing you don't ever know is what's going on behind the scenes. So Chelsea won the league under Jose Mourinho the second time round. The following year, he got sacked. But before the end of that season where he won the league, there was already problems. The problems had already begun, if that made sense. And you know what Chelsea should have done that year is moved Jose on in the summer and brought in a new manager sooner, rather than leaving it until like the season already begun, and then you're playing catch up all year and everything else. And maybe that's the way Todd Bowley looks at this around. Look, we were happy to give him a year to see if maybe he could prove us wrong. Maybe he could be the more progressive manager. Maybe he could give us a style of football we wanted. But maybe they got like 7 games in and went, we've lost 4, drawn 1. The players are unhappy. Let's cut our losses now. Because the thing, what you don't want to do if you're Chelsea, Graham Potter appears to be the number one choice. And what you don't want to do is miss out on him, say, no, we'll stick with Tuchel, and then somebody else comes in. It could be RB Leipzig need a manager. Maybe RB Leipzig go, do you know what? We fancy a bit of Graham Potter, and then Graham Potter's gone. Like sometimes you've also got to look at it and go, maybe we've got to strike now while the iron is hot, while he's available. Jamie Drummer here says Tuchel is available to replace Arteta now. If so, I know you would have taken. I know if Arteta got sacked tomorrow, you'd take Graham Potter. Would you take Thomas Tuchel over Mikel Arteta?
Mate, I'll take you over Arteta. I'm not even joking. I'll take you over Arteta, bro. We're coming on to the Arsenal game in a minute, so I'll save it for then. But yeah, I'd take Thomas Tuchel, and the reason, like, yes, it's not quite worked out in the last 6 months or so, and they have been, like, I want to read his record out, yeah, because the last 6 months they've not been great. Yeah, I think we can all agree they've not been great, Chelsea, right? But I've seen this posted today. That his first 50 games, he's had 100 games in charge, yeah? Oh, I think that's Todd landing in his helicopter, mate. I've got to go. First 50 games, he won 32. Last 50 games, he won 28. Yeah. In the first 50, 11 draws, 7 losses. In the last 50, 13 draws, 9 losses. So only 2 extra on each. This is where it's different, though. In the first 50, they scored 81 goals and conceded 24. In the second 50, they scored 87 but conceded 53.
Yeah.
That's like double and more what they conceded in the first 50. And that's where the problems lie. But if you look at it, he's only lost 2 games more in the last 50 than the first 50. And he's only won 4 games more in the first 50. But because he won the trophies in the first 50.
Yeah. I think Thomas Tuchel, I stand by what I've said. I still think he's a top manager. I just think that with everything that went on, he's a different owner's. What can happen in these circumstances is this. The old ownership that were backing him leave, the new ownership come in. There'll be players. There's always players in your squad that are not buying into what you're doing. If they look at this and go, right, we've heard rumors that the new ownership are not keen on Tuchel, you know what players do. They down tools, they create problems, they make it difficult for the manager. And I think that's what's kind of happened. And Chelsea, especially in the last 6 months, the back end of last season now, they've hemorrhaged goals. And that's because players in the team are not working as hard as they were. You only got to look at a prime example of this is Man United. How many goals we've conceded in the past 6 months of football. In the last 4 matches, our players have run hard, worked hard, fought, stayed in shape, and we've conceded 2 in 4. We've had 2 clean sheets. But, you know, we haven't in none of our games we've been peppered like we had been in the previous sort of 15, 16 games. And I look at Chelsea as a team that when they had that defensive stability, it was because everybody was pulling together and pulling in the right direction, and that's gone. And I think that's why this again, is it a mistake? It's hard to say. And Tuchel is a top class manager, but his win percentage in the last since December till now, I read today. I haven't gone and checked it myself. I read was below 50%. For only winning half your games with a squad like that, it doesn't matter what you've done in the past. Right now, you're not good enough. And if you've lost the dressing room, you've got to go. It's more about whether Graham Potter, whoever it is that comes in, is right. Because if Graham Potter comes in and takes Chelsea to another level, because the one thing I've never really seen Chelsea do is they've never been kind of looked at as one of the best footballing teams in the country, one of the best footballing teams in Europe. And if within the next year, Graham Potter gets them playing like Brighton, but with world-class players, they are competing for every major trophy that they're competing in. Of course, they're beatable because everybody's beatable. However, they will move up an echelon because the way I've seen Brighton at some point dominate and outplay the vast majority of Premier League teams, with no disrespect. Yes, they've had lots of people like the look of Casado right now. Basuma moved to Tottenham. Cucurella went for 60-odd million. But they were doing that without a proper striker. They've been doing that without
Danny Welbeck is their first choice striker. They had Neil Maupay up front last season with Danny Welbeck.
Like Trossard's decent and talented. As an example, nice. Like there's good players in there. But the point I'm making is you actually went through that Brighton squad over the last 3 to 4 years. You'd probably name 5 players that could. I reckon you could name no more than 3 players that could get into every other top 6 team. And obviously, the worse the top 6 teams get, maybe the more players that can come in. I just look at it.
I don't even think you could name 3. Yeah, was Ben White getting any other top 6 team other than Arsenal? Probably not.
Not now that Varane and Lissandro are there.
Would he getting at Man City? No. Would he getting at Liverpool? No. Would he getting at Tottenham? Maybe.
Over Eric Dyer getting at Tottenham, Ben White, definitely. But I can't. Yeah, so I hear you, and I just think you look at it, and I think to myself, if he gets the only real problem he's going to have, 2 potential problems. The question marks are Champions League football. He has no experience. I know he's played Europa League, but I don't think he's got any Champions League experience. The second one is, and this is the only thing, is will the players respect him because he hasn't been of that level yet? But that comes down to the owners. I think it's about the owners making the players know this is our guy. You are respecting him or you're out. That has to be the message. But as long as he gets the players on side, I've heard he's a very good man manager, Graham Potter. And if those players are on side, honestly, I think Tuchel's.
Do you know what I like about him, Terry? Right?
Definitely.
He's obviously a very good coach, right? And the reason I think, the reason I know he's a very good coach, not just because what we see on the pitch, you never see that guy agitated on the touchline. When he's worked all week to set a game plan up for a team, and then when the camera pans in on him, he's sat in his chair just watching like this, just watching because he's so confident that his game plan is going to work that he doesn't need to be standing there waving his arms around every 2 seconds, pulling players around. Yeah, and that tells me that is a proper coach there. Yeah, he has done tireless work all week to study the team he's playing against. Yeah, and he knows he's got an inferior, he's coming up against better teams. Yeah, so he's never going to be able to compete financially with the players. So they have to find a way. Yeah, and there's always a way. Whether you're a tiny little club like Brighton, going in against Man. Can you imagine Brighton in the Champions League? I just want to say it. Do you imagine them playing Real Madrid or someone? Like the way that they play, I think they're scared the life out of some of these teams in Europe, mate. Yeah. So now, like you said, imagine that at Chelsea when he's got the preparation, the way his team plays, the fact that he's not a ranty, ravey, screaming manager. Yeah, he's just a chill, sit on the touchline. Like the only time I see him do anything is when he's talking to his assistant about a substitution. Yeah, the rest of the game, he's pretty much chilled, just sat in his chair. Yeah, just enjoying the football because it's pleasing on the eye. Imagine him at Chelsea, man, with all of them players that they've already got. Aubameyang. If you put Aubameyang and Lacazette when they were good, right, for Arsenal, if you put them in Brighton's team back then, 2 years ago or so, they'd be challenging for top 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now imagine he's got Aubameyang, he's got Sterling, he's got Koulibaly, he's got Kovacic, Kante. The Havertz, I know Havertz ain't been great for Chelsea, but I guarantee he gets better under this manager.